All right. Let's talk about the guy that I am buying. And this is another one that I have bought in off seasons prior to this. And it only is continuing to make more and more sense to buy this player. I am buying Brandin Cooks of the Houston Texans. Brandin Cooks this season, it was a little bit of an up and down year at times. But the dude finished as wide receiver 20 this year. I mean, he was a mid-range wide receiver, mid to low-range wide receiver 2 on the season. You need those kind of players.
There was a time early on in the season where he was a wide receiver 1, and people were calling him quarterback-proof because he was still doing it with the turds that they were rolling out at the beginning of the year.
He'll finish the season as wide receiver 1.
Huh.
Wide receiver 12 overall because the last game, Mike Williams.
Yeah.
Right behind, Keenan.
Nice.
There we go.
Sorry, go ahead.
But talking about quarterback proof, it's interesting you mentioned that because I looked into the games where he specifically played with Mills, because I think Mills has shown enough that I believe he's probably going to start the season as their quarterback. Now, they're in the top 5 with their selections. They could easily pivot and say, we want one of these top quarterbacks.
And they're also teetering on the fence with the coach. Right.
We
didn't talk about that.
Well, we saw one teeter today, and the teater went pretty hard down on Titus, and he was gone. So, but you got to imagine too, if they trade Watson, there's a strong. Let's say they trade him to New York, and they'd probably get Daniel Jones back. If they trade him to Philadelphia, they would get Jalen Hurts back.
Right, but the thought was
if he stays, if they stay put,
he's
shown enough. Go ahead.
He's shown enough.
That's where you're at.
If it's anything else, it's probably an upgrade. At least in theory, it should be an upgrade over Davis Mills. But I think he's shown quite a bit this year.
Agree.
But in just the games that he had with Davis Mills, he averaged 9 targets, 6.5 receptions, a little over 69 yards a game, and he had 5 touchdowns. I see you smiling over there. And he had 5 touchdowns. Extrapolate that over a 17-game pace, that would be 156 targets, 110 receptions, 1,175 yards, and 8 touchdowns, which this season would have been good for wide receiver 9, ahead of guys like DK Metcalf, ahead of Mike Williams.
Ahead
of a lot of really talented players we like. So
don't you forget, Mike Williams was on pace for 17,000 yards, 1,400 touchdowns, and then he hurt his knee against Cleveland and wasn't the same.
And then the rest of the stats don't count then.
Still finishes wide receiver 12 in the year, though.
Still happened.
It happened.
Woo!
So I'm a really big fan of Brandin Cooks. He is going into his age 29 season, which is why he's a guy that you could acquire. Because if he's going into his age 25, 26 season, you're not getting him. He's going early in drafts, or people aren't going to want to trade you him. But you can get him. But he's felt like a guy you've been able to get like every offseason. Like he's always just been available, and then just always finishes as one of the top wide receivers. In fact, other than his 2019 year,
he's been good every year but one.
And the 1 year was the concussion season. Remember, he had like 2 or 3 concussions in the same year. We were worried about, can he even continue to play football? But outside of that season, starting with 2021, working down, wide receiver 20, 17, 13, 15, 10, 13. So, I mean, he has been a wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1 every single season that he's been healthy.
His production drastically outweighs the cost. You know what I mean? Like he's the old school Brian Hartline. We talked about that. Like you used to be able to get Brian Hartline used to consistently give you wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 numbers for like 7 years, and you used to be able to get bought for like a 3rd round pick every single year. There's always those wide receivers out there people just don't respect. And I know you're talking about that age frame, but a ton of receivers like. You go look at these receivers' age. The good thing with this huge influx of young guys, because all these well-known guys that we love, Devontae Adams, Odell Beckham, Brandin Cooks, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, even guys like Kenny Galladay, Michael Thomas, they're all entering that 29, 30 years old season. So now these players are playing a little bit longer, so there's value to be had there, but a guy like Brandin Cooks always outweighs his value. So if you can get Brandin Cooks for maybe a guy you just don't love, maybe you give somebody a good handcuff in a 2nd round pick. Like if I can get Brandin Cooks for a second, honestly, I would pay 2 seconds for Brandin Cooks if I'm a contender, because I want that value. I want that wide receiver 2 value. Yes, the wide receiver pool is just getting deeper and deeper every single year, and I expect guys to take a big step forward. We'll see how Michael Thomas does when he comes back next year, but a guy like that, that you can slide. It's going to give you wide receiver 2 numbers that you could pay wide receiver 3 cost for and slide him into your wide receiver 3 role. That's a difference maker. That's a championship caliber player that can help you win what we all play for. And that's a Dynasty Fantasy Football Championship. So I love the value there to be had.
Well, and it's easily paying wide receiver 3 costs because I was looked at a bunch of startup drafts, people that are doing drafts right now, and I got 6 of them that were at least far enough to be where he was being taken. All of these also had rookie picks involved. So we know that there's 4 to 5 to 6 wide receiver rookies that are being taken ahead of him as well. But the average was right around wide receiver 37. So you add in those 4 to 6 rookie wide receiver picks that are being taken ahead of him. We're talking in the 40s where he is being selected at wide receiver. So he is absolutely a great value. The best one was wide receiver 32. That was the highest out of all of them. The lowest was wide receiver 44.
So we've talked value about the previous 2 guys. Right now in our trade finder, he's going for a second or a second and a third. Does that guy does that speak to you guys as great value
as a contender?
It does. Yeah, it does.
It's a late second.
Yep.
In a not so deep class as it stands right now. So if I'm giving up a late second in 2022 and giving up a 23 third, again, the third will never move the needle for me. It's always something I'm happy to throw in to get a deal done. So to me, if I'm going to have a second and a third for a guy that's helping me to win a championship, dude, if I had 3 good receivers and I could get that depth, because
for sure.
Again, look at how many people lost this year because of the depth, right? I did. I was the number 1 seed in 2 leagues. 2 leagues. I was the number 1 seed with a first round bye. In my first game back, my receivers were on bye in both these leagues. I was eliminated right away because I didn't have
COVID injuries.
It was all COVID related guys. So to me, I didn't have the depth. So the more depth I can acquire at good pricing, at good value, is what I want to do. Because sometimes people play Dynasty like, well, I got 3 guys. I don't need Brandin Cooks. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You have bye weeks. You have injuries. Like, you have COVID out there. Like, you need as much depth. And we talked about this before the season started. We talked about this a lot. About, like, hey, make sure you're getting guys that might, guys like Brandin Cooks, guys like Donald Parham. Like, just because you have a good team, you want to keep adding. Like,
yes.
This is Dynasty. There's no stopping the roster mold. Like, you have this mold of clay that you're just constantly trying, like you're in the movie Ghost, just mold into this Dynasty.
In the movie what?
Ghost.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Come on. Pay some respect to Patrick Swayze. Curtis Ferguson.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that.
I've seen it.
Patrick Swayze.
Children.
To me more.
Yeah. So you're trying to mold. You're trying to mold this thing into clay, right? Like into a fantasy football championship trophy. But when you get that top and you want to put the hand in the bowl to make it a bowl trophy, sometimes it's going to flop and drop down. Unless you got a good base.
You got to have a good base.
Good base.
You got to have a good base.
Easy with those hand motions. Yeah. Jeez.
Also, this analogy is going over like 50% of the people's heads.
A lot of your hands are below the table and they keep coming up.
Well, that's why I watch a YouTube channel. Like, I'm just molding it up here, trying to build me a fantasy football championship trophy. So you want that depth. I like doing it. When I'm a contender, those are the guys I'm like, hey, I like.
I can't even remember who we're talking about.
How do I build around this? His name's Brandin Cooks. So
Archer.
Hey, I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. I mean,
there we go.
Not going in this year, but we were talking about Robert Woods this way 3 years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like 3 years ago. These players exist. They always exist. There's a running back we're going to talk about here. Like, I want to talk about Melvin Gordon this show, right? Like, but I am skipping on Melvin Gordon because we talk about him every single year. But Melvin Gordon's still on this list. Melvin Gordon has been on this list for 3 years now, and he's been producing all 3 years. He shared carries with Javonte Williams, still finished as a running back 2 in a year, going to go in the offseason, going to sign somewhere, and guess what he's probably going to do if he stays healthy? Finish as a running back 2. You're going to get Melvin Gordon for those bottom-of-the-bag chips that get the little flavor on your fingers so you're walking around. Little frisky fingers, you.